My name is Harold Brennan. I am 68 years old, a retired forensic accountant living in the quiet suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. For 3 years since my wife Catherine passed, the desert silence has been my constant companion. My daughter Lisa says she worries about me rattling around in this big house alone. That's why she insists on our weekly Wednesday lunches. She says it's for my bonding time with my grandson, but I've learned that when Lisa says something is for my benefit, I should probably double-check the fine print. Last Wednesday, during one of those carefully orchestrated family gatherings, my life took a turn I never anticipated. My neighbor called me, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. She asked if I was expecting anyone at the house. When I said no, she whispered the words that started it all. "Then why is someone loading boxes into a moving truck in your driveway?" Before the alarm could fully register in my mind, before I could even process what she was telling me, I heard something from across the restaurant table that made my blood run cold. My daughter Lisa exchanged a look with her husband Derek. It wasn't a look of concern or confusion. It was the look of two poker players who just realized someone had seen their cards. And then Derek laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, more like a bark than actual laughter. He caught himself quickly, disguising it as a cough. But I had spent 40 years reading people's financial crimes in the numbers they left behind. I knew guilt when I heard it. In that moment, I understood that the real threat to my life wasn't a stranger with a moving truck. It was sitting across from me, stealing fries from my grandson's plate. What they didn't realize was that they were laughing at a man who had spent 4 decades unraveling fraud schemes worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And a forensic accountant knows one thing above all else. Every crime, no matter how clever, leaves a paper trail. They had just shown me exactly where to start looking. The restaurant was one of those trendy farm-to-table places in Scottsdale, the kind where the menu describes the emotional journey of each vegetable. Lisa had chosen it, of course. She always chose expensive restaurants for our Wednesday lunches, and I always paid. It was another one of those patterns I had noticed, but never questioned until now. I sat in a booth designed for Instagram photos, not comfort, watching my 5-year-old grandson Tyler push organic sweet potato fries around his plate. The boy had Catherine's eyes, that same shade of warm hazel that used to make my heart skip. Looking at him was both a comfort and a wound that never quite healed. Lisa sat across from me, her attention divided between her phone and a conversation I wasn't fully part of. My daughter had grown into a beautiful woman, the kind who knew exactly how beautiful she was and wielded it like a weapon. Her husband Derek sat beside her, his arm draped possessively over the back of her chair. He was all flash and no substance, a real estate developer who talked about deals in millions, but somehow always needed to borrow money for the little things. "More water, Dad?" Lisa asked, not looking up from her screen. Her voice had that practiced sweetness that I had once mistaken for genuine affection. "Yes, thank you," I replied, watching Tyler attempt to build a tower with his fries. My phone buzzed against the table. The caller ID showed Margaret Chen, my neighbor of 15 years. Margaret never called unless something was wrong. She was a former emergency room nurse who had seen too much to panic over small things. I answered immediately. "Harold," her voice came through, clipped and urgent. "Are you home right now?" "No," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "I'm at lunch with Lisa." "Why? What's happening?" "There's a moving truck in your driveway," she said, and I could hear her curtains rustling as she peered through her window. "A big one, with a crew. They're carrying boxes out of your house right now." "I'm looking at them. Did you hire movers?" The world tilted. My house, Catherine's house, the place where every memory of our 42-year marriage was stored, being emptied. I stood up so fast I knocked over my water glass. Ice cubes scattered across the table like fleeing witnesses. "Lisa, I have to go. Someone's at my house. Someone's taking things." What I expected was alarm. What I expected was my daughter jumping up, grabbing her keys, offering to drive me home immediately. What I got instead was that look, that split-second glance between Lisa and Derek, loaded with meaning I wasn't supposed to catch. Then Derek laughed. It was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The timing, the tone, the way he immediately tried to swallow it back down. He turned it into a coughing fit, pounding his chest theatrically. "Wrong pipe," he sputtered, his eyes watering. "Sorry. Dad, I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just a delivery truck at the wrong address. You know how those GPS systems get confused in your neighborhood?" Lisa nodded, a little too quickly. "He's right. Remember when Amazon left that patio furniture at the Hendersons' place? Let's just finish lunch and then we can all go check together. No need to panic." But I had already seen it. That flash of fear in my daughter's eyes, quickly masked. That laugh from Derek, like a man watching a house of cards begin to wobble. For 40 years, I made a living catching people in lies they didn't even know they were telling. I could read guilt in the way someone held a coffee cup, detect deception in the spacing of numbers on a spreadsheet. And right now, every instinct I had developed over 4 decades of forensic work was screaming that my daughter knew exactly what was happening at my house. I left money on the table, kissed Tyler on the head, and walked out of that restaurant without looking back. I could feel their eyes on me the whole way, and I knew with cold certainty that I wasn't just driving home to investigate a break-in. I was driving toward the revelation that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. The moving truck was gone by the time I arrived. In its place was an absence, a negative space that felt almost physical. I stood in my driveway, staring at the tire marks on the concrete, and felt the first wave of true fear wash over me. Margaret met me at my front door, her face lined with worry. "I got photos," she said, pressing her phone into my hands. The truck, the license plate, the men carrying boxes. I didn't know what else to do. I scrolled through her pictures with trembling fingers. Professional movers, uniforms with a company logo I didn't recognize. Phoenix Premier Relocations. They had loaded at least a dozen boxes into the truck, and I had no idea what was in them. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, both young enough to be my grandchildren, took my statement with patient condescension. They dusted for prints, found none. They examined my locks, found no signs of forced entry. They checked the security system I had installed after Catherine died, and this was when the first crack appeared in what I thought I knew. "Sir," the senior officer said, frowning at her tablet, "according to the security company's records, your system was disabled yesterday at 2:47 p.m. using the master code. And the front door was unlocked this morning at 10:15 a.m., also with the master code. We're showing authorized entry. Authorized." The word hung in the air like smoke. "I haven't given my code to anyone," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't entirely true. I had given it to Lisa last year, when she offered to check on the house while I was at a medical appointment. I had given it to her because she was my daughter, and I trusted her completely. The officers suggested I change my codes, recommended I inventory my belongings to see what was taken, and left with the kind of sympathetic smiles people give to confused old men. They didn't say it, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought this was a family matter. They thought my daughter had probably just borrowed some things without asking. And maybe, if I had been a different kind of man, I would have accepted that explanation. But I had spent 40 years following the money, tracing the invisible threads of fraud through corporate ledgers and personal accounts. I knew that crimes don't happen in isolation. They have roots, patterns, histories. Whatever was happening here didn't start with a moving truck in my driveway. It started somewhere else, sometime earlier, in a moment I hadn't recognized as significant, and I was going to find it. After the police left, I walked through my house with the methodical attention of a crime scene investigator. I wasn't looking for what was missing. Not yet. I was looking for what was different. The desk in my home office had been disturbed. Nothing obvious. Just small signs that only someone who had sat at that desk for 30 years would notice. The angle of my chair was wrong. The pens in my holder were facing the wrong direction. The thin layer of dust on my filing cabinet had been disrupted, finger-shaped streaks visible in the afternoon light. Someone had been going through my files. Someone who had taken their time, who hadn't felt the need to rush or hide their presence. I opened the filing cabinet, my heart pounding. My fingers found the folder labeled Property Documents, and I pulled it out with a sense of dread that proved fully justified. The folder was too light. Half the documents were missing. The original deed to the house, gone. My copy of the title insurance, gone. The home equity line of credit paperwork that Catherine and I had taken out 15 years ago and paid off completely, gone. In their place was a single sheet of paper I had never seen before. It was a quitclaim deed, dated 3 months ago, transferring ownership of my house to something called Brennan Family Holdings, LLC. My signature was at the bottom, notarized and witnessed. Except, I had never signed it. I had never heard of Brennan Family Holdings, LLC. And I had certainly never agreed to give away the home where I had lived for 35 years. The home that was worth, according to my last property tax assessment, $1.4 million. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. But my mind, trained by decades of forensic analysis, was already racing ahead. A quitclaim deed doesn't sell a house. It transfers ownership without any exchange of money, usually between family members or into trusts. It's a common tool in estate planning. It's also a common tool in elder financial abuse. Someone had forged my signature and stolen my house, and that someone almost certainly had my security code, knew my filing system, and felt comfortable enough in my home to spend time searching through my documents. My daughter's face flashed through my mind, followed immediately by Derek's nervous laugh. No. I pushed the thought away, but it kept returning like a tide against rocks. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a legal pad, doing what I had done for 40 years. I followed the money. The first thing I did was check the county recorder's office online. Arizona makes property records public, and within minutes I had confirmed my worst fears. According to the Maricopa County records, my house had been transferred to Brennan Family Holdings, LLC 3 months ago. The LLC itself had been registered in Delaware 6 months ago, its ownership hidden behind the corporate privacy laws that state was famous for. But I had worked corporate fraud cases involving Delaware shell companies before. I knew how to dig deeper. Next, I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. The results made my stomach clench. 3 months ago, someone had taken out a home equity line of credit against my property for $650,000. The lender was Western States Credit Union, and the loan was listed as current, meaning payments were being made, but not by me. I had never applied for this loan, never signed any papers, never received any funds. I checked my bank accounts. My pension deposits were arriving normally. My Social Security payments were correct. The investment accounts Catherine and I had built over 40 years were untouched. On the surface, everything looked fine. But I knew better than to trust the surface. I pulled up the Western States Credit Union website and dug into their online banking portal. The HELOC account was there, linked to my Social Security number, but tied to an email address I didn't recognize. Someone had set up online access using my identity but their own contact information. The account showed $650,000 dispersed in a single lump sum 3 months ago. The money had been transferred immediately to an account at a different bank. The payments were being made from that same external account. Minimum payments only, just enough to keep the loan current and avoid any red flags. They were bleeding my house dry while keeping up appearances. It was classic fraud behavior, the kind I had seen 100 times in my career. Keep the payments current so no one looks too closely. Extract the maximum value, then disappear before the bill comes due. But who was they? The Delaware LLC was a dead end without subpoena power. The email address on the account was a generic Gmail that could belong to anyone. I needed another angle. I spent the next 3 hours going through every piece of mail I had received in the past 6 months. I kept everything, a habit Catherine used to tease me about. Now, that habit might save my life. I found it buried in a stack from 4 months ago. A letter from Arizona Notary Services, confirming my appointment on March 15th to have documents notarized. The letter thanked me for using their mobile notary service and hoped I was satisfied with Jennifer Malloy, the notary who had visited my home. I had never scheduled a notary. I had never met anyone named Jennifer Malloy. And on March 15th, according to my calendar, I had been at a doctor's appointment getting my annual physical. Lisa had driven me to that appointment. Lisa had insisted on driving me, actually, saying she was worried about me driving myself after fasting for the blood work. Lisa had known I would be out of the house for at least 2 hours that morning. The pieces were falling into place, each one more painful than the last. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. I thought about calling Lisa and confronting her directly. The father in me wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe someone had stolen her identity too. Maybe Derek had done all of this without her knowledge. Maybe I was wrong about everything. But the forensic accountant in me knew better. Confrontation would give her time to prepare, time to destroy evidence, time to craft a story. If my daughter was really doing this, and every piece of evidence pointed that way, then she had been planning it for months. She would have contingencies, explanations, ways to make me doubt my own sanity. I needed an ally, someone who could help me navigate the legal complexities of what I was facing, someone who owed no loyalty to my daughter. The next morning, I called the number I had kept in my wallet for 15 years. Victor Reyes had been the FBI's lead forensic accountant on a massive pension fund fraud case. I had worked as an expert witness. We had spent 6 months together in a conference room, building the case that eventually sent 3 corporate executives to federal prison. He had retired from the bureau 2 years ago and opened his own investigation firm, and I had never thought I would need his services. "Victor," I said when he answered, "it's Harold Brennan. I need your help." 45 minutes later, I was sitting in his office in downtown Phoenix, telling him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Harold," he said finally, "this is going to be hard to hear, but I need to say it. Everything you're describing points to elder financial abuse by a family member. It's more common than people think, and it almost always involves someone the victim trusts completely. The fact that they used your security code, knew your filing system, and scheduled the notary for a day when you'd be out of the house tells me this was planned carefully by someone in your inner circle." "I know," I said. "I just need you to help me prove it." Victor nodded slowly. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to subpoena the records from that notary service. Jennifer Malloy will have to testify about who actually appeared at your house that day and signed those documents. Second, we're going to pierce the corporate veil on that Delaware LLC. I have contacts who specialize in exactly this kind of work. Third, we're going to trace where that $650,000 went after it left the credit union. Money always leaves a trail. And fourth," he paused, meeting my eyes with sympathy, "we're going to do all of this without your daughter knowing. You need to keep acting normal. Can you do that?" I thought about Lisa's face at the restaurant. That flash of fear quickly hidden. "I've been acting normal around criminals my whole career," I said. "I can do it a little longer." The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I continued our Wednesday lunches, sitting across from Lisa and Derek, making small talk about Tyler's kindergarten and Derek's supposedly booming real estate business. I smiled when Lisa showed me pictures of a vacation to Hawaii that must have cost thousands. I nodded sympathetically when Derek complained about cash flow problems. And every night, I received updates from Victor that peeled back another layer of the betrayal. The notary, Jennifer Malloy, had been easy to find and easier to break. When Victor's investigators showed up with evidence that she had notarized fraudulent documents, she crumbled within minutes. She confirmed that Lisa had been the one to hire her, had been the one to present the documents, had been the one to sign my name, while Jennifer pretended not to notice that the supposed Harold Brennan was a woman 3 decades younger than the photo on the ID she had presented. The Delaware LLC was registered to a law firm that specialized in corporate privacy, but Victor's contacts discovered that the operating agreement had been prepared by a local attorney named Mitchell Crane. When we pulled Mitchell Crane's other client files through court records, we found Derek's name on a dozen other shell companies, most of them connected to failed real estate deals and one civil fraud judgment that had been quietly settled. And the money. The $650,000 had been transferred to Brennan Family Holdings, then immediately distributed. $200,000 to pay off Derek's credit card debts. $150,000 for the down payment on a house in Sedona that was titled in Lisa's name alone. $100,000 into a brokerage account that showed aggressive, losing trades. and $200,000 that had simply vanished into cash withdrawals over 3 months. They had taken everything my house was worth and burned through most of it already, and they were planning to take more. Victor's team had found emails between Lisa and a real estate agent discussing the sale of my house. They were planning to list it in 6 weeks, using the fraudulent quitclaim deed to establish ownership. The asking price was $1.3 million. They were going to sell my home out from under me and pocket the proceeds, and I would have no legal standing to stop them because, according to the county records, I didn't own it anymore. I had to act. But Victor counseled patience. "We have enough to prove fraud," he said, "but we don't just want to stop them. We want to destroy their ability to do this to anyone else. And that means getting them on record, admitting what they've done." He explained his plan, and I realized why he had been the Bureau's best forensic accountant. It wasn't just about following the money. It was about understanding the psychology of the people who took it. 3 days later, I invited Lisa and Derek to dinner at my house. I told them I had something important to discuss about my estate planning. I watched Lisa's face carefully when I said those words, and I saw the flash of greed she tried to hide behind concern. "Of course, Dad," she said. "We've actually been wanting to talk to you about that, just to make sure everything is in order for the future." The future. She meant the future where I was dead, and she was spending my money. I prepared Catherine's famous pot roast, using her recipe that I had memorized over 4 decades of marriage. I set the table with our wedding china. I made everything as normal and comfortable as possible. They arrived at 6, Tyler in tow. My grandson ran into my arms, and for a moment, the pain of what was about to happen almost overwhelmed me. This little boy would grow up knowing his mother was a criminal. That was a wound that would never fully heal. But I couldn't let sentiment stop me. I had a job to do. We sat down to dinner, and I let them guide the conversation. Lisa talked about how she worried about me being alone in this big house. Derek mentioned a lovely assisted living community he had heard about. They were setting the stage, building toward their pitch, and I let them think they were succeeding. Finally, over coffee and pie, Lisa placed her hand on mine. "Dad," she said, her voice soft with practiced emotion, "we've been thinking. This house is so much work for you to maintain. The yard, the pool, all those repairs, and the property taxes must be enormous. Derek and I were wondering if maybe you might consider selling it and moving somewhere more manageable." I looked at her hand on mine and remembered the day she was born, how tiny her fingers had been, how fiercely I had sworn to protect her. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, walking her down the aisle, holding Tyler for the first time. Then I remembered the forged signature on the quitclaim deed. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I've been thinking about that too. In fact, I've been doing quite a bit of thinking about my assets lately." Lisa's eyes brightened. Derek leaned forward slightly. "Really?" Lisa said. "That's wonderful, Dad. We only want what's best for you." "I know exactly what you want," I said. And then I placed a manila folder on the table between us. Lisa's face went pale. Derek's hand jerked, knocking over his water glass. I didn't move to clean up the spill. I just watched them. "That folder contains copies of the fraudulent quitclaim deed you filed with the county," I said, my voice flat and calm, the same voice I had used in depositions for 40 years. "It also contains the bank records showing the $650,000 home equity line you took out in my name. The statements showing where that money went, including the Sedona house, the credit card payoffs, and the investment account. The testimony from Jennifer Malloy, the notary you hired to witness my forged signature. And the emails between you and the real estate agent planning to sell my house in 6 weeks." Lisa was crying now, whether from fear or shame I couldn't tell. Derek looked like he was calculating his options, his eyes darting toward the door. "Please don't try to run," I said to him. "There's an FBI agent parked across the street. This is a federal case now. Wire fraud, bank fraud, elder abuse. Victor Reyes sends his regards." Derek's face went gray. "Dad," Lisa choked out, "please, you don't understand. We were desperate. Derek's business failed. We were going to lose everything. I was just trying to protect my family. I was going to pay it all back. I swear." I looked at my daughter, at this woman I had loved unconditionally for 43 years, and I felt something shift inside me. The father who had held her hand at her first day of school, who had danced with her at her wedding, who had cried with joy when Tyler was born, that father was still there. But sitting next to him now was the forensic accountant who had spent a lifetime watching people try to justify their crimes. "You weren't trying to protect your family," I said quietly. "You were trying to steal from it. There's a difference." The next hour was a blur of activity. Victor's team arrived with federal agents. Lisa and Derek were read their rights. Tyler was crying, confused, and I held him while strangers took his parents away. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of their plan became clear. This wasn't a one-time desperate act. Derek had been running variations of this scheme for years, targeting elderly relatives and vulnerable investors. Lisa had been his partner from the beginning. They had already defrauded Derek's aunt in Florida out of $300,000 and were planning to target Lisa's cousins in Oregon next. The federal prosecutors offered Derek a deal if he would testify about the other people involved in his various schemes. He took it. Lisa, confronted with the mountain of evidence against her, pled guilty to avoid a trial. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Derek got 6. My house was returned to my name. The fraudulent liens were removed. Victor's contacts in the financial services industry helped me freeze my credit and secure my accounts against future attacks. The money they had stolen was mostly gone, but the sale of the Sedona house and the seizure of their other assets recovered about $200,000. It wasn't enough to make me whole. Nothing would ever make me whole again, but it was justice. And sometimes justice is all you can salvage from wreckage. Tyler lives with Catherine's sister now, my sister-in-law who had always been suspicious of Derek and is raising him with the stability he needs. I see him every weekend. I tell him stories about his grandmother, about the woman who would have loved him so fiercely it would have taken his breath away. I don't tell him the truth about his mother. Not yet. Someday, when he's older, he'll learn it for himself. But for now, I let him believe that his parents made some bad decisions and are paying the consequences. That's close enough to the truth. I still have Wednesday lunches, but now they're with Margaret, my neighbor, and Victor, who has become an unlikely friend. We sit in that same farm-to-table restaurant in Scottsdale, and we talk about grandchildren and golf and the weather. Normal things, safe things. Sometimes I think about Lisa in her prison cell, and I feel something I can't quite name. It's not satisfaction. It's not grief. It's something colder and more permanent, like a scar that has healed but never stops aching. This whole experience taught me something I wish I had learned without such a painful lesson. Trust is not the same as love. You can love someone completely and still verify what they tell you. You can hold your family close while still protecting yourself from their worst impulses. Unconditional love is a beautiful thing, but unconditional trust is a dangerous one. I also learned that retirement doesn't mean your skills become useless. For 40 years, I followed the money and caught the people who stole it. I thought those days were behind me, but when the crime came to my own doorstep, perpetrated by my own blood, those same skills saved everything I had worked my entire life to build. Some people might ask if I regret turning in my own daughter. Some people might say that blood should have protected her from consequences, that family loyalty should have come before justice. To those people, I have a simple answer. She stopped being my daughter the moment she decided I was just an asset to be liquidated. I owed her my love, and I will always love the girl she used to be. But I didn't owe her my house, my security, or my silence. What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments below. And if you or someone you know is concerned about elder financial abuse, please reach out to Adult Protective Services in your area. The people who do this count on shame and family loyalty to keep their victims silent. Don't let them win,